If you don't have lemon yellow, another one that works is Naples yellow. It's like a very light version of the yellow ochre. It's a much more natural and realistic tone. Again, very good for portraits. Probably not for what we're doing today. So I don't know if you can see my palette, but I've got the white at the top. This is how I like to set up my palette anyway. You can, if you've got a different way you want to set it up, that's fine. I've got the white, lemon yellow, yellow ochre, crimson, burnt sienna, and then I'm going to mix the burnt umber with the ultramarine blue. And then we get this beautiful, rich, dark colour. So if you're mixing your own black from scratch, you'd use the process that I discussed before, but excuse me, you know when a sneeze is coming but it doesn't come and it just sits in your nose? Oh, it's the worst. Alright, the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber have enough of the same tones in it to be able to give you that black colour, so that's why the two of them together is really good. I might actually put the tiniest bit more blue in that. I feel like it's still a bit brown for my taste. There you go, and it just makes it that next step lower in value. Alright, and again, we're going to be starting, hopefully you can see that alright. We're going to be starting in our lowest value area. So have a look at your picture. I need to zoom in on mine. I'm going to be looking for my lowest value. This time I'll be using a much smaller brush. Because when you actually look at where the lowest value part of your painting is, it's actually not a lot to put on there. You don't need a lot of paint. So we just want to grab this little shadow that lives underneath this leaf. And be generous with your darker colours, because later on we're going to work back into these darker colours. So basically all we're doing is just blocking out every other colour that we see and just try and make a mark where our darkest colours are and lowest value. I want to have a little bit of oil on my brush. Without the linseed oil, this paint will never dry. It will stay wet forever. I actually, when I was first started painting, I didn't really understand that concept, that oil added to oil paint makes the oil dry. It just didn't, uno comprehendo. Okay. And then this shadow underneath the pear is really quite dark. Not the whole shadow, just a small part of it. Alright, then I'm going to wipe paint off my brush. When you look down here, to me this looks very red. I can see a lot of very deep, warm colours in there. If you're struggling to work out what you're seeing, I've done this a couple of times where I've gone to this great app called Procreate. Okay. So if I'm struggling to work out what a colour is on Procreate, pop your photo on there, hold your finger down and it'll actually give you the colour. So that looks very much to me like a yellow ochre. When I'm coming down here, very red brown, very, very warm brown. And then it's going into like a dark yellow ochre as we get higher, and then lighter yellows right through to white. So that helps give you a bit of insight into what colours are actually there. If you have Procreate or you have an iPad, I would really recommend download Procreate and just give this a go, and it'll really help you get your head around what colours you're looking at, help you to identify what you're looking at. Because when you can do that, you can then create that colour, and then you've got it there. So if I'm thinking I don't quite know what that colour is or how to create it, there it is, it's right there. It's a very, very dark orange. Again, don't fall into the trap of adding black because you'll lose control of your colour, but use the black that we've made between the burnt umber and the ultramarine to darken your colours. All right, so we've got a very, very reddy brown, which is what's going to give us a little bit of movement. So this burnt sienna is a very red colour, so I'm going to add a bit of that. I'm just going to let my cat in because he's attacking my dog. Both our pets are very, very cranky today. They've got quarantine syndrome and are both very upset. Our cat's seen too much of our dog, and our dog's seen too much of the inside of the house, and they're not friends at the moment. Okay, so that's a very dark colour, so I really want to put a lot more of this burnt sienna in there. And maybe a little bit more of this crimson. And a bit of yellow ochre. Okay, and when you look at this colour, you want to drag it out from your darkest colour, from the colour you just used, blend it together and see if it works, see if it makes sense. Thin it out and check that you're happy with that colour. And when you're happy, grab a bit of paint. Start blending it into your lowest value. I feel that's still too cool. I want it to be warmer. So I'm going to add more crimson, a lot more crimson. I want it to be a very reddy sort of a shadow. I'm going to use it to feather out this shadow here. Now I can see here the shadow hasn't connected. There's a gap and there's a bit of light coming through. So I'm going to add this lighter brown that we've just made in there. I'm going to grab another smaller brush to blend it. Okay, so a dry brush with no bias, no paint on it. And then you just feather that through very lightly. We're not trying to bore a hole in the canvas, just very, very softly, as if you were tickling someone with a feather. And there you have a bit of blend. I'm going to bring this colour up through here. Now when we get up here, the temperature's cooler. It's not so red. So it was very red down here. Now the temperature has changed. The value's the same. It's still dark like it is around here, but we're going to need to add more blue because we want it to be cooler. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my blue paint. I'm going to mix it in with this colour that I've made, and it will cool down the tone of the brown. Okay. bit more yellow ochre if you need to. You want it to have almost a bit of a greeny tinge to it, but still be the same value. We don't want to lighten it yet. We just want to blend that in. Use your dry brush if you need to. Alright, so I'm going to start working on the cooler colours, and I'm going to start changing their value. As you can see on the pear, we're going from dark to light very quickly, but I can see this area here has a good shade to it, and then we suddenly go into light. So being a cooler colour, I'm going to add yellow to my blue, bluey brown. I'm going to add a bit of yellow ochre to my bluey brown, and a bit more blue, because we want it to be almost greeny, mustardy sort of a tinge. Don't be afraid to make a colour bright. You may feel it looks too bright on your palette, but by the time we blend it all in, it's going to really add something. Okay, I'm going to add the smallest touch of white because I want it to be lighter, not just in colour but in value as well. Oops, I added way too much there. Basically, I'm going to remake this. Okay, I need some more yellow ochre. Way too green. Oh, it's brown. So I want to bring the value down a bit because I made it a bit high. Alright, that's getting a bit closer. Alright, I'm going to oil up my brush again, it's got too much paint on it. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of that colour there. I really just want to work on that shadow. That's going to give the pear some shape. So I can see with the pear, the rounder part of the pear, the shadow very quickly drops away. And that's going to give the effect of this top part of the pear being very straight and the bottom part of the pear being very round. Okay, now I can see there's a little bit of a shadow on the other side of the pear. I might add a little bit more yellow ochre to that, make it a little bit more mustardy. I'm going to add that little shadow in as well. I don't think that one's quite as cool. I'm going to go back to my homemade burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of the actual burnt sienna. I'm just going to add a bit of that burnt sienna at the top because the burnt sienna is very good for blending and warming something up. So that temperature changes quite quickly. I'm going to start adding some just straight yellow ochre in here. So I'm going to start pushing that yellow ochre into the shadow because colour changes very quickly. And I'm going to cool down the yellow ochre a bit actually. It's too warm. Add a bit of that blue. I'll just start pushing that colour into that shadow. And that yellow ochre comes around the side here. So warmer at this angle, so I'll mix a bit of burnt sienna with my yellow ochre. I might even add a bit of crimson, warm it up a little bit. And again, it starts getting more red, more warm or orange on this side of the pear. Think of yellow ochre as your base colour. And from there, do you need to make it warmer or cooler, lighter or darker? As we start going down into the pear, base of the pear, it starts getting darker. Not the darkest shade, but a darker shade. And then it drops in value. As well as in temperature. Okay, so what I'm starting to notice as I'm doing the shades is that the area where the light hits onto this round part of the pear seems to be a lot warmer than the shading in the lower part of the pear. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm doing my blending and shading. This part of the pear I want to keep cooler. This part of the pear I want to keep warmer. So this is where I'm going to be putting some of my blues in with my paint. And over here is where I'm going to be putting some of my reds into my paint. And as you need to lighten things, start using a bit of white. If you've already picked up a bit of colour off your brush, could be that you don't need to pick up any more paint, but if you do, just grab it and start playing with these colours. I don't have a set formula about